Hello everyone, not exactly a gameplay video kind of video today, however, we will be talking about the concept of death. And is it okay to lose heroes, and when is not, or is it ever acceptable? We'll kind of talk about all those topics, how to reduce death and what to expect. To give some background, this is my first playthrough here, and so let's actually talk about deaths and if they are acceptable. I would say yes. Especially on these two conditions. Your first time through the game because you literally know nothing. And second aspect of that is definitely early on when your people may not have the best party compositions, and when people aren't doing a lot of damage or going first, there's a higher chance people will die. And I would argue there's more incentive to push early on than there is later, and we'll kind of talk about that. Because you don't get resolve trinkets or really a lot of loot unless you finish a dungeon. Now, if you have a bunch of resolve 1s and 2s, or even 0s you don't care about, mostly resolve 0s and 1s, 2s you actually want to start keeping. But if you have resolves 0s and 1s, most likely every week you're cycling them out of the stagecoach already. And this is where I'm going to get into my first, where some people say it's controversial. But once again, I wanted to dedicate a whole video to it and explain why I think it's okay. I'm going to put up like a little infographic here real quick to explain the acceptability of deaths. Does not mean they should happen. It's kind of like a kid having a tantrum. You would prefer they don't have them, but when they do have them, the age in which the individual or the child is really depends on how acceptable it is. For example, you have like a 2-year-old and throw a tantrum. You don't want them to have it. However, it's generally understood and accepted that a very young child doesn't have emotional control. Now, if you're a 25-year-old and you start throwing a temper tantrum, rolling on the floor, screaming and pounding your fist on the floor, it's happening. It's not very acceptable in many people's eyes, and that's kind of how I view deaths in Darkest Dungeon. Very early on in the game, you don't want deaths to happen, but if they do, it's not the end of the world, not a huge big deal. Just, make sure you learn from whatever mistake you made and move on. If you're a veteran of Darkest Dungeon, I would expect you to really reduce deaths early on in the early game. It's still going to happen, and once again, I would not judge anyone who let people die early on, because most likely a lot of those heroes are going to get dismissed. My only caveat to that is don't necessarily get into the habit of just not making good parties, because sometimes it can be hard to turn that switch back on, and you might accidentally lose somebody in veteran that you don't want to. Now, we're going to analyze my deaths in my very first playthrough. And we're going to talk about where they happened, why they happened, kind of bringing it back to everything. So you will run into people on YouTube, the internet, life in general, who always do everything perfectly. So if you're a new player or if you're a veteran player, try not to say that you should never lose anybody. I think it's utter blasphemy to say that. You should never try to lose anybody or not care at all if someone is lost. I mean, I've gotten to the point where I really don't care, and I know I get grilled by some people. At the end of the day, deaths really are not just game breaking unless you're playing on the hardest difficulty. If you're playing on Radiant or Darkest, deaths are inconvenient but not end game, like game ending. There we go. Unlike the hardest level where you can only lose 12 people. So any other scenario outside the hardest difficulty, deaths are more of an inconvenience. Doesn't necessarily mean you actually lose a lot, especially if it's veteran and below. You really don't want to lose people in veteran, but it's much easier to bring up a new person to veteran than it is a new person up to champion. Now, we're going to look at my deaths here. We're going to go to the first 60 weeks. So remember, it's my very first playthrough. As you can see, learning the new game, holy crap, those first 5 weeks, literally lost 3 people. Didn't have a friggin' idea what I was doing. You can see there's a slight learning curve until, we got to a boss here. Yeah, that's right. First time not knowing a boss. I remember this, well, you can also see it. I literally, first playthrough, I still remember this Crusader getting boiled alive. I had to leave him after Roger, which is a woman, interesting, died. Just absolutely horrible. Not very good. And then you can see we go another 5 weeks, lose somebody else to who knows what. But then you do see right around that 25-week mark. So we pull this up, veteran level right there, but the rest of these people should have been below, should have been resolve 2s, yeah. So as you can see, right around there, and this is my first time playing, I kind of made like a pact saying, you know what? No, because this is, yeah, now. So most likely right here is when I first entered champion, right here. Bandit Raiders were delayed. Oh, so that's Wolf. Okay, so yeah, these actually... We'll look at this one later. She looks lower, level 3. Yeah, we'll talk about that. So these 3 deaths right here, let's explain what happens. There is a huge, hard increase between veteran to champion. So I'm assuming that these 2 are easily, yeah, resolve 5. This is me trying to figure out where the heck, oh, we're delayed with the Raiders. My bad, didn't read that. Oh, so Wolf came twice. I was scared to fight him. Okay. So definitely because of resolve 5, and then 3 deaths because of Wolf. But you still notice I've hardly lost anybody still. And I tried to curb off Wolf at this point. And I probably didn't know I could send in lower people. So I was being dumb and I was sending in high level. So that's my fault. But then I imagine I was trying to bring some people back up here with some additional deaths. Once again about those 5 weeks apart here in the veteran. And then here we go. Okay. I believe unsustainable stress. Oh, these are all low level. I'm wondering what I did here because they all die. Oh, no, I remember. Okay. I sent them into the darkest dungeon to try out the first week, and I pushed them as far as they could. So this is darkest week 1, and you should see Hand of an Ally. Oh, that sounds like I was trying to do the Siren or something, not entirely. Oh, that where she got hit. So yeah, okay, no, right here. See, from the darkest dungeon, fled. So you're going to naturally lose people, and this is why I come back to, you're literally just going to have to lose people your first time through. Do not hesitate. There will be ramp ups. You will learn the game. So right here, like I said, first 5 weeks lost people. I went about 15 weeks-ish, 10 to 15 weeks. Lost a couple people, fought a couple of bosses, and then boom, 40 weeks. Didn't lose anybody. Got to that new ramp up. Lost 3 people in 30 weeks because of Wolf and champion level. And then I have honestly no idea. Vile Hag. Ooh, the Hag really likes to kill my people. So I never really learned how to kill the Hag well, apparently. And then, like I said, checking out the darkest dungeon. Now, these could have all 4 been avoided technically, but they're all low level. I literally grabbed them out of Stagecoach, threw them in. My first actual attempt didn't go so well. And then we go a couple of weeks where we have a couple of people dying, but once again, low level. I'm not sure what the heck I was doing, to be honest. Then once again, we had another escape from the darkest dungeon. Another resolve 0, though, so I'm assuming I might have gotten to the 2nd level or something. Swine God, lost somebody. So once again, champion level boss. 150, 150. Not sure where these people died at. So what you are noticing, I do a lot of escape from darkest dungeon, heart attack, abhorrent shambler, yada yada yada, and sustainable stress. I'm trying to remember, I don't know which dungeon that would have been, but eventually what I want to get to, you see a lot of deaths in a row, but they're all in the same weeks. Look at this, another like full party wipe essentially. And then we get here, we finally get to the end game. So at week 260 I finally beat it, but as you notice in the last, like, from week 220 essentially to 260, I lost a crap ton of people, but it was mostly trying to figure out the game. And that's why I do have an issue when people say losing heroes is never a good option or viable strategy. Losing a hero mid-dungeon is freakishly annoying and should really never happen. Well, not should never happen, but there's going to be moments in the game where you literally get critically struck and then you get a bleed out and your guy dies. Sometimes you just literally cannot play any better. Because then you talk to yourself and you have to mind game back 3 turns where you could foreseeably see getting critted. You can be that cautious if you would like. That is fine. That is a perfectly okay playstyle. But early on, it is vastly important to push onwards and get as much early loot and heirlooms as you can to give yourself the early week game, early loot game, like, push off. Because later in the game, you do want to finish your dungeons and stuff, but the amount of time you put in leveling your people does not equal less time, than it does to take someone to get back up there. So that's why I keep saying resolve zeros. You literally take them off the wagon, you throw them in a dungeon, half of them die, you don't care, or you dismiss them. But veterans, you do want them to get out okay, and definitely with champions, you want to get them out okay. So once again, I'm going to put a little graphic here, probably. Early game deaths are acceptable, expected, and I always get in trouble because I say they're good. What I mean by they're good is who really cares? Like, they don't hurt. It's the best time to lose somebody, so I am going to try to change my wording terminology. They're not good, but it is the best time for them to happen. Once you hit veteran, you do really, really want to just stop it, and you do see that once again right here. I decided essentially, after I lost this veteran plague doctor, 38 weeks went by, and I said, no, we're not losing anybody. I have my veteran heroes. I'm ready to go. And then I started losing people just by the sheer difficulty of the increase from veteran to champion. Don't be scared. You're going to lose people if it's your first time. If you're a returning player, what you should mostly see is a couple of deaths in the early game, maybe. Even then, if you've played the game a couple of times, it's pretty hard to lose people early on unless you deliberately do not care, which I do sometimes. And then you'll probably almost have nothing in the veteran, to be honest. And then you get the champion. If you have like a bad moment or two, you can have someone die. But for the most part, there's really not too much that occurs. Sometimes you'll get a boss that kills somebody, but your deaths will be significantly more... They won't be as clustered, I'll say. If you're a veteran of the game, you should expect your deaths to be more periodic than like, oh, the first 10 weeks of the game I lost like 8 people because I didn't know how to play. You might lose like a person in the first 20. A person in the next 30, a person in the next 20. You know what I mean? Until you get to events where you literally cannot die, where like if Wolf comes, you're not ready, so you just send in a few people. For the most part, if you're a veteran in the game, as I said, you've learned that deaths during dungeon runs are painful, but you have the knowledge to avoid that and do better. So I expect you to, but if you are brand new to the game, take solace in the fact that yes, it's gonna happen. You are just gonna lose people to bosses, random attacks you don't understand, events you don't understand. You might go scouting a dungeon with 4 people just to see what's up and they all die. It's okay as long as you're not playing on the hardest difficulty, because then you won't automatically lose. Let me know what you think below. I know some people, as I've stated many times before, think no deaths. They think that deaths cannot happen at all, and if you have anyone who dies, you're a terrible Darkest Dungeon player. I would like to finally bring down said image or motif. You can lose people. I wouldn't recommend doing it all the time, but it's your campaign, your playthrough. But if anyone tells you don't know how to play the game because you lose people or you let someone die, I would not ignore them, but it's just part of the game, and the game literally warns you, you're going to lose people. Some people will say you always have to back out. If you have the time to always retreat from a dungeon that's going poorly, or if you retreat because there's a potential death foreseen, you can do that. It's probably the proper way if you don't want to lose anybody. But once again, to me, it's a time, not a time waste, but it's a time cost, and you don't even know if that person's going to die. You're backing out based on the potential of them dying, and once again, that's your pace. If you don't want to lose anybody and then go crap on people on the internet about it, go for it. But I, for the most part, push onwards, lose people early, do not care. I believe in my hardest difficulty run, I lost someone the very first like 10 weeks. In my mod run, I lost someone the very first 10 weeks. In this run, I lost someone the very first 10 weeks. Like, it just happens. It's okay if it does. Remember the child and the temper tantrum. Expected early on, acceptable, but once you're, a certain age, you can have it happen, but it's not really acceptable anymore because the time, the cost, and the knowledge you should have come into play. Unless it's your first time through, those get thrown around a little, and you probably will see the same U-shape I did, where high deaths and then high deaths at the end. So you have like novice, and then you go to champion, you have high deaths because you understand, but in the middle there, you should be really cultivating your people really well and getting rid of those quirks. Thank you so much for watching. Hope this kind of helped you maybe ease yourself a little bit or understand why you see your deaths where you do. And if you're a new player to the game, you just feel like you keep losing people. Once again, hopefully it kind of like lets you know like, oh, I'm losing people early on. It's okay, because once I get to veterans and champion, if I don't lose people there, all those people who died in the early game, and it's just a learning curve. Thanks for watching.